Hello, this is another video in my series about the Dark Eye core rules, and I'm going through the list of disadvantages and I'm going to cover them in detail. Before I said I'm not going to cover them in detail. I said it I think more than once, but I changed my mind. I'm going to read through the complete list. I'm not going to explain everything in detail. I'm not going to give you the mechanics, but I'm going to translate all of the names and roughly give you an idea what the disadvantages are doing. For example, the first one means afraid of, and it basically means you have some kind of phobia. What it exactly is and what it means, you're completely free, but you have some kind of phobia. Then you are poor. You simply have no money at all or less money at the beginning of game or during character creation when you are buying your equipment. Then you are bound to an artifact. This is for spellcasters, and it means there was some accident during your education or something as a spellcaster, maybe while you were making a ritual or while you were casting a spell or something, and that bound your ability to cast spell to a certain item, an artifact, something that would mean something to you, and that an item that was very close to you. Often this will be your traditional artifact. A lot of spellcasters have some kind of traditional artifact. For example, the Staff of Mages is a special artifact that is bound to them, in a ritual, and it would not be uncommon to be bound to this artifact if you take this disadvantage, which would mean you can only cast a spell if you hold your staff in your hands. And for other traditions, for example, for an elf it could be a personal instrument or something, or his bow. It doesn't have to be the traditional artifact that is magical. It could also be something that simply means something to you. It must be something special, and then you're somehow bound to it, and if you don't have this item, I think you cannot as easily cast spells. It's a lot more difficult for you. Next is you are behäbig. You are not as fast as people. It's the opposite of nimble. You run slower for whatever reason. Maybe you're overweight, maybe you have problems with your legs or something. You're just slower than other people. Blind. I don't know why they added this. You are simply blind and can't see, and I don't know how you can go adventuring with this. You could, in rare circumstances, it might make sense in certain campaigns or something, but in general, I don't think this is something that could be in the core rules, but you can be blind if you want. Then blood rage. This can happen during combat. You go into a blood rage and just start killing everybody, no matter if friend or foe. So this can be quite dangerous. You have a limited sense. Your sense of hearing, seeing, tasting and smelling, or feeling is somehow limited compared to other people. You're colorblind. Next is you are overweight, which means you are heavier and you are bigger, and this might be difficult, for example, for you to do certain things, and it might also be problematic to get cloth or something, because you would always need something custom. Then there is you are more sensitive to poison. Poison has a greater effect, or it's more difficult for you to resist poison. Next is you're ugly. You simply don't look very good. No, you're ugly, and it's a problem when you're interacting with people. You're sensitive to heat, which would mean if you're in the desert or something, you would have to live with some consequences, with some negative modifications on what you do or something. This is the same for cold. You're more sensitive to cold. This down here means no flight solve. That's something for specifically for witches. I didn't mention this. As witches can have an wooden artifact, for example, the typical broom, which would allow them to fly, and it is made flying by using a certain salve that you put on it, and it has to be brewed. And this simply means you cannot use this salve. You cannot make an object fly, a wooden object fly. The wooden object doesn't have to be a broom or something. It can be anything that is of wood, just a stick or a chair or something like that. It's only something that is mostly out of wood. Next is also for witches. You don't have a familiar for whatever reason. Yeah. Next is for spellcasters. It is body bound force or power. It means, or body bound energy. It means your astral energy is sitting in your hair, and this usually means you have very long hair and more hair than normal people. And when that hair gets cut off, you lose a lot of your astral energy. You don't lose everything, but you lose a big part of it. Next is I can't read it. What does it say? Yeah. You have something that makes you standing out in your looks. For example, you have like a wart on your nose, or you have your hair, part of your hair is colored differently. You have a wisp that is different colored or something like that. It's something minor and not necessarily something that is totally unnatural. Yeah, but still something that makes you stand out, and people look at you as with suspicion, or they might make them superstitious or something when they're dealing with you. Next is your sensitive. I don't know if sensitive is the right word. You are more easily. You're more likely to become ill. Yeah, disease. Your resistance against diseases is lowered. Lästige Mindergeister. That is like annoying minor ghosts or minor spirits. This is for spellcasters, and when you're casting spells, depending on how many astral energy you used in that moment, there is a likeliness that suddenly some elemental spirits will manifest and be around you and somehow annoy you. For example, a little flame that's around you and will set something on fire or heat something up, or there is a bit of wind that constantly is blowing through your hair and is annoying you. These minor spirits go away pretty quickly, but while they are there, they are a problem, and you get a negative modifier on stuff you're doing, and there might be some damage done by them depending what the game master decides. You are sensitive to light in a negative way, so you cannot go into bright daylight, and if you do, you get some consequences, negative modifiers on stuff you do. Magische Einschränkung. It's the opposite of the magical attunement. I think I've called it magical attunement. Magical attunement gives you a bonus, for example, when you're in a certain environment. This is the opposite. It gives you a negative modificator on casting spells when you're in a certain environment. For example, like in the woods, in the mountains, under the earth, or in bright daylight. In this case, you can choose bright daylight. Next is night blind. I don't know if that word exists as a literal translation. You simply cannot see when there is not a lot of light. So when light gets low and people usually could still see something, you are basically seeing nothing. It's dark for you. The next one is you have less astral energy as a spellcaster, or you have less karmal energy as a priest, or you have less hit point as everybody, or you have less resistance against influence of the mind, or you have less resistance against physical influence. And this means you have less fate points up to 0, down to 0. And this means is Pechmagnet. It means you are more likely to roll critical failure when you're doing a skill test or something. Is it like that? I have to check. No, I was wrong. When something bad happens, simply the adventure, something bad happens, you're most likely to that it happens to you. It's most likely that it happens to you. For example, someone loses something, or someone steals from you, and it's most likely that the thief is stealing from you. Next is a personal weakness or something. I don't know how to translate that. For example, you might be arrogant, or you might be envious of people, or you have a lot of prejudice against people, and that can get you into problems. And you have this this weakness, and it really affects you, and you can hardly act against it. And when you do, you have a negative effect. Then you have to follow certain principles. For example, this is common when you are a priest of a god. For example, when you're the priest of prayers, the son of God, and light and justice and truthfulness, you are not allowed to lie. And you have to follow this. And if you don't follow this, there will be negative consequences because you feel bad about it. And depending on how difficult, how complicated, or how severe this principle is you have to follow, then it has a level from 1 to 3. Schlafwandler, you are Nightwalker. Is that a word? I don't know. You just while sleeping, you walk around and run around and get yourself into danger, possibly. A bad habit. Next is bad habit. This is something minor. This is not really a real disadvantage like others which affect you really. This is more about having fun playing this out, because it is a minor, not so important, not so effective bad habit. The examples, here are some examples given, and it says you are picking your nose. Yeah, that is not really a problem, depending on where you do it and who's with you. Or you are a smoker, or you always are a bit unpolite, or a bit. It's hard to, yeah, it doesn't fit in English. This doesn't exist. Yeah, or you simply talk a lot. Yeah. So it's not really something really problematic. It's not a phobia, or it's not like you're totally arrogant and treat people mean or something. It's really a minor thing, and it's more about having fun playing this out. Next is a bad attribute, a negative attribute is it called. I don't know what a good translation would be, but it is something you're super superstitious, or you are very greedy, and if you see money, you forget all danger and try to get the gold or something. Or you have a bad temper and can become angry very easily, and then you become unreasonable and get yourself into trouble. That would be a negative attribute. And the next ones are simply reduced regeneration of astral energy, reduced regeneration of karmal energy, reduced regeneration of hit points. And then there is the literal translation is a weak astral body, which means you are kind of losing more astral energy when you cast spells than you normally would. So you cast a spell, and it costs a certain amount of astral energy to cast a spell, and you'd simply lose more. You somehow like leak in astral energy. Next is the same thing for priests. They lose more carnal energy. They're leaking this carnal energy. This is sensitive smell. And sensitive smell does not mean that you smell better. Just when you smell something bad, you just immediately like, oh, I have to throw up, or I can't go there, I have to leave this room. It smells so bad. It doesn't mean you smell better. Just when you smell something bad, you smell it as much as everybody else, but you're more affected by it. And then you have a speaking problem. You might stutter or something, and that is a problem when you're interacting with people and try to talk to them. Ein Stigma is stigma. Stigma is for something. You have red hair. No, you have green hair. Or you are an albino. Or what other examples are he given? Your eyes look different, like a cat or something. So it's something very obvious, very strange, and makes people look at you with suspicion or something. And it is more difficult to interact with people. Next is you can't talk. You don't have a voice, you can't talk. Then you can't hear. That's this. You're simply, you can't hear. You're incapable in something, in a talent, which means you are more likely to fail in a talent test. This one is you are not free. You are like a slave or something, or you're possessed by, you're someone's possession, a nobleman or something. This is something you choose during character creation. That's the opposite of being a noble. The normal is you are a free member of your society, and this is only choosable for certain societies. For example, the Elven society does not know unfree people or noble people. Everybody is free there. And the same for the Thorwalians. But if you're from the Foundland, you could be someone who basically belongs to an nobleman. Next is you have some obligation or some debt or something. It's not about money, but you owe someone something, or you are bound. There is someone who is probably who is going to tell you what to do, or who can give you a command. And if you don't do what you're commanded to do, what you have to do, if you don't fulfill your obligations, then there is a consequence you have to deal with. For example, this could be something. It could be that you are in debt and that you owe someone money, but it also could be that you are just a member of a tribe, and your tribe needs you, and you basically have to help your tribe, or you are a nobleman, and there is nobleman above you who can give you orders what to do, or you are a magician, or you're a priest, and then you have to then you are part of the church or of the mage academy or something, and they may have something they want you to do, and you have to follow this usually. The next is you have lost, for example, an arm or a leg or a hand or an ear. You're missing something, and depending on what you're missing, it is has a different consequence. This is, you have a true name. This is important when someone tries to cast an influence spell on you. If he knows your true name and used it to like control your mind, it is considerably easier for him to control your mind. It does not mean he can automatically control you, and this is, for some creatures, this is the case. But in this case, the true name means it's simply easier to influence with magic. Wild magic is you are more likely to critical failure when casting spells. and this is currently one of the members of my group has this, and it is, you really to roll a critical failure in a skill test is really very uncommon, and he has now rolled several very, I don't know, this is really a severe thing to take, and it is, I don't know if it's maybe too bad to take. I have very bad experience with this, or members of my group have very bad experience with that. Next is, you are more easier to be influenced by, your resistance is lowered against any kind of spell. Every kind of spell that is going against your resistance is easier to cast against you. And the last one is, you are very fragile, which means you have to more suffer under pain and damage, which happens automatically when you get hurt in combat. When you're hurt in combat, you get a pain level associated when you lose hit points, and you are more affected by this. So that was the list of disadvantages. Here is the same list for short reference, and the next chapter will be talents. So the next chapter is basically how do I use a talent and stuff, and what talents are there. I don't know, I don't think I'm going through all the talents. I really give only a few examples. If you have questions about the disadvantages, then feel free to ask, comment. I try to answer. I'm not going to explain the mechanics and stuff. Yeah, only more general stuff I'm going to answer about this. So if you have any questions, ask, and the next chapter will be about talents. Bye.